controlling Epe. So what are we really now talking of? Are we talking of Lagos State churches as it is politically demarcated? Or we are now talking of Christ Apostolic Church as it is being administered? And I think I will say as it is being administered. So in my paper, I tried as much as possible to say the geographical location of Lagos State. Lagos State had 5 divisions: Ikeja, Badagry, Ikorodu, Lagos, and Ekpe. And the coverage is 347,500 hectares, or 3,577 square hectares of land, with approximately 18 million people. 18 million people. Why I'm using these statistics is because I'm now talking to those who are equipping themselves to go into the world and preach the gospel and bring in more people into the fold of God. Today, in Lagos State, how many have we captured out of these 18 million? Are we really moving? What is the percentage of the Muslims or non-Christians to the percentage of the Christians in Lagos State? We don't have a very genuine statistics to that effect. But if what is being propagated is what it is, we had 45% are Christians and 55% are Muslims and non-Christians. That is what is being peddled around. But no one has ever given us a genuine statistics to that. Out of these 45%, how many are within the fold of Christ Apostolic Church? Out of these 45%, with just my own observation, I can see that we have more people in the Roman Catholic than any other denomination in Lagos State. I don't have the figures, but I'm only talking in terms of observation that I have seen. If you see the buildings of Roman Catholic Church, you will know how big they are, and they are always filled to the brim every time they worship. Taking these observations, you will know they have more adherents than any other denominations. So it's a challenge to us as students that are moving out to evangelize, to really know how and where to go into. What I've observed is that we are only mushrooming. CAC is mushrooming, is not expanding. What do I mean by mushrooming? I'm saying mushrooming in the sense that you have one church here, say 1,000 people worshiping. After about 1 or 2 years, that number will dwindle. Am I right? Someone will come and conduct revival. After conducting its revival, people will be carried along. After that revival, they will follow that person to another place. So rather than expanding, we are mushrooming. So we are not expanding. So out of 18 million, how many are we covering? That is, by the way, how do we also came about Christ Apostolic Church? I thank God for the life of Reverend Moses, who delivered paper there yesterday, who wrote, and he had done extensive research on those topic. And I don't think any of us could claim to be an authority more than that young man. I also saw the truthfulness in his presentation. None of us born in Christ Apostolic Church will ever be so bold to write as much as he had written. There are a lot of hidden facts that we know, but you cannot put down. Yesterday, Professor Oshun he rang me, talking to me. He was commissioned by the Odubanjo's family to write on the life and times of Baba Odubanjo. I was asked to approach him. I did on their behalf, but I warned him. I warned him. I said, you have been asked to come and write. I hesitated to ask you to come. But they knew I could be someone who could talk to you and write it. So I fulfilled my own part to talk to you. The whole thing is now left for you. And he said, okay, I will do my best. He did his best. And they have now, he wrote certain things and certain facts also he did not put. The facts he had put down, the family now attacked him. Why should you put this there? The book is not yet out. And he was telling me why he was bittered. I won't say much. He was bittered. And I told him, whosoever sat beside me there, I said, but I had warned you. So what I'm saying in essence is that an outsider can be bold to put all details on paper with all his facts. So, and that's why I gave credit to the man who wrote those books. And I'm recommending those books to you. He has not sent me, but I'm only recommending it to you. Please read them. They are facts. So I'm moving off from the preamble on the pre-emergence of CAC in Lagos. There I only wrote the metamorphosis of the church. It metamorphosed from Precious Stone, Faith Tabernacle, the Apostolic Church, and finally to become Christ Apostolic Church, which you have heard yesterday. And I don't want to repeat and repeat because of our time. But before the revival of 1930, the adherents of the Faith Tabernacle, which subsequently metamorphosed into this assembly or Atebute Lefun, worshipped from different places. Like our lecturer said yesterday, of the cherubim and seraphim moving from one place to the other without being really established. We also passed through that stage in Lagos. We had no specific assembly. And that reminds me of the opinion I also have. I told some people in course of my discussion sometimes ago, I said, comparing Christ Apostolic Church as a Pentecostal church with other Pentecostal churches, we are much more stable and stabilized more than any of these churches. In the sense that many of them are in rented apartments. Am I right? In Lagos, very close to our church, we have about 5 redeemed churches in rented shops. And I cannot call them a church. Are they churches? No. Landlord may come one day and say, mo fẹ́ lo ilé mi, and they move away. And you will not get as many members of that congregation that you are pastoring moving to another place. Is that right? Or do you agree with me? But in CAC, we have our lands and we have our churches. Only very few, very, very few are in rented apartments. And for this, we are much more stable, we are much more stabilized than many of these churches. So in the period when we were, our fathers, we are moving from one place to the other, many of our members could not move along with them. One good example I have that I saw and I witnessed was the time we were rebuilding Christ Apostolic Church General Headquarters. By the time we were pulling that church down, we had about 1,800 worshippers. 1,800 worshippers by the time we were pulling that church down. We were looking for a place of worship, and eventually we settled at our Olushi assembly. We had discussion on how to use the assembly. Olushi assembly will start in the morning. After they left, we will now start our own assembly. And yet we call it Christ Apostolic Church, one fold, one shepherd. One fold, one shepherd. To me, I saw no reason why we should have one service in the morning for Olushi and one service in the afternoon for the Ebute-Elefun people. Why not combine together, since we see it is one but the fact still remains, our ministers, of course, you are also going to be, we love money, not winning souls. Am I making sense? We love money, not winning souls. That's the gospel truth. And that's one of the things that, if you ask me to put it down in a book, will I be able to do that? But another person outside, if he wants to write that history, will put it that way. Some of our members felt, ṣebí mo wá sin Ọlọ́run ni. So they joined the people at Olushi during the morning service. And we lost some of them to Olushi. But to me, we have not lost them. They are within CAC. But as a pastor of an assembly, of course, I'm not salaried. You will say, àwọn tó yẹ kó máa tún sàn dá mẹ́wàá bí, wọ́n tún lọ ń sàn dá mẹ́wàá wọn síbòmíì. But what does that mean? But that is what will happen. Abi? So by the time we came back to Ebute-Elefun, we were only about 400. From over 1,800 to just 400. Because we are moving from one place to the other. So our fathers, when they were moving from one place to the other, they lost some of the followers along the line. So they moved from one man's rented apartment. Eventually, they came to Ebute-Elefun. You'll find it in Nigeria, I don't want to be reading because of our time. The emergence of CAC. If CAC had been other denomination, we will also want to keep certain things with us. I was saddened when we were being shown the rod of Orimolade yesterday, and we cannot find the rod of Apostle Babalola. We saw the rod of Moses Orimolade. The rod or the bell of Babalola, I don't think anybody can get it. Or do you know where it is? Thank you. Many things that we are attributed from had been lost in one way or the other. All the books this man was talking of, I saw them at Ebute-Elefu. By the time we were to demolish that building, but today, we don't know where those books are. It's unfortunate. The place where Babalola was baptized at Moloni Bridge, number 51, Moloni Bridge, now Adeniji Adele, had been demolished, and Jakonde House has sprung up in that place. If it were another church or denomination, I'm sure they will have purchased that place. They will have preserved that place for history, for our future, and yet it has been lost. Where was Babalola baptized? A great man of repute. People that we should be proud of, that passed through this place. We have lost that. I don't know how we can go back and retrieve that place. It may not be too lost if you have people of means, if you have people in power, if you have people in position. At least we can locate that place. We could have talked to the state government. Please, let us acquire this place, and we can then fence it. If that water is not there, but we could still do what? Fence it. It's a challenge to those of us who are here. It's a challenge. It is not only presenting paper, but we are also talking of research and actions to be taken after listening to all this lecture. Whosoever can find the rod of Babalola, I'm sure we will also be very much happy to get them. Aren't we? Sports. Where Babalola had his baptism was where our fathers were worshiping before moving to Ebute-Elefu. Two things really happened there. Two things happened at that spot. One was the one of baptism of Babalola. The second one was that the split from the Apostolic Church, separation from the Apostolic Church, took place on that spot. And that's the more reason why that place is very important for us to keep. The split in Christ Apostolic Church took place on that spot. Yesterday, our esteemed lecturer told us 7 people were ordained ministers. Pastor Adegbega was the last person on the list of those 7 that were made pastors of the first generation something brought about that split, not only on the issue of Emma Logo, divine healing. I am not going to go further than that because I am a son of the soil. There are certain things that you are responsible. I have given a paper to our father, the coordinator, a letter which I found from the archives of my father on that issue. I kept and I so treasured. And I gave him to photocopy for research, not for you. for research in future. But I want us to note that by the time Baba Odubanjo was asking the Faith Tabernacle to go along and become the Apostolic Church, one man stood alone, and that was Pastor Adegboyega. And he said, yes, okay, the Apostolic Church, they've all agreed. They were now in the Apostolic Church. And Baba said, ẹ jẹ́ ká pe àwọn òyìnbó wá sí Nigeria. To do what? Adegboyega said, to do what? We can not be able to take care of these white men. The food they will eat, the house they will live, will eat much into the economy of the church. He objected to their coming at that time. It was only a minority. And he had his say, but the majority had their way. And they invited them. And when they came, they cared for them. Fine. And when there was a problem between Baba Odubanjo and these white men, which I said, kò ń ṣe concern ẹ̀yin. Because, and he said, ẹ̀ ń lo oògùn. You are using APC, whatever. He saw them with tablets. And what do you expect the congregation to say when you say, "Come á lo oògùn," and ẹ̀yin ń lò? And the white man said, your own faith seems to be stronger than ours with respect to using this. We don't regard this as oògùn. And he was annoyed. And that was what started the disaffection, or continue to be the disaffection of these people. And when Baba came to a meeting and he reported them, and they took a decision, káwọn òyìnbó ìwà máa lọ. Are you following me? Kí àwọn òyìnbó ìwà máa lọ. And Adegboyega said, àwọn òyìnbó yóò ní lọ. Tó bá ṣe wọ́n náà ńkọ́? I said they should not come. You brought them. Ẹ wá ní kán máa lọ, níbo náà ń lọ? That was the beginning of disagreement and confusion. They sent them off. Baba Adegboyega was an instructor at the railways. I don't know whether they call it Nigerian Railways then, but at railways in Ebute Metta, he was an instructor. And that's why when people say, àwọn tó dájọ́ CAC sílẹ̀, illiterate ni wọ́n ò lówó, wọ́n ò mọ nǹkan kan, is because you don't know. Those who established CAC were elites of their time. And Baba Adegboyega went back to meet his white counterparts at the Nigerian Railways. And he said, àwọn òyìnbó kan mo fẹ́ kó wọn wá síbí, because they are white. They agreed, and he housed them at the Nigerian Railways quarters. That was the beginning of a point of no return. Our lecturer was talking of 30% went with CAC, 30% with Adegboyega. Is that right? You heard him yesterday, Abi? What led to that 30% was this. Baba Adegboyega was working with the Nigerian Railways. And in those days when you are talking of communication, the Nigerian Railways was assisting with communication. They had signals. They had signals. And the properties where these churches were bore the name of the Apostolic Church, Abi. But this time it became scrambling to take possession. Adegboyega had taken possession through the signals he made from Nigerian Railways to these churches. And he was able to retain. By the time Baba Odubanjo and Baba were moving from one lorry to another, going to all these churches, they could not get those churches from them. They were unable to get to the north. Adegboyega had taken over the north, and that was why Baba S.F. Odunaike remained with them at the Apostolic Church. Because Baba was talking yesterday of cultural or tribal affiliations. Yes, it assisted, but not 100%. Baba Odunaike, S.F. Odunaike, was from Ijebu-Ode. Baba Odubogun was from Ijebu-Ode, but they also remained the Apostolic because they were in the north. Adegboyega had captured them. By the time they came, yes, and they met Baba Odubanjo, the Baba Adegboyega lo Egba ni, and Baba Odubanjo said, whether Egba or no Egba, remain there. So they remained there. Baba also felt that the separation was for a few years. Definitely they will come together. And they never came together. And that was why he said they should remain there. There is also a missing link, which I want to, is not there because I'm saying this because of the lecture which I was privileged to hear yesterday. And which I know. First Squad came to Nigeria because of the confusion between the Apostolic Church and Christ Apostolic Church. First Squad came to Nigeria. Please go and do that research. I am having a microphone with me, and I'm now talking at large to people. First Squad came to Nigeria because of the between the Apostolic Church and Christ Apostolic Church. Reverend Segun Odunaike was the first child of Baba S.F. Odunaike, the first son. And he's the youth something. I have forgotten the name then. They were called. And they said, "Ẹ̀yin bàbá yìí, ìjà ti tó, ẹja parí ẹ̀." He was at the Apostolic Church. Members of the youth at the Apostolic Church were agitating. Yes, the Youth Congress. They call it Youth Congress. They were agitating. And part of this Youth Congress were with Christ Apostolic. The children of these fathers were also here. But they were interacting. And these people now said, agitating. And they were excommunicated from the Apostolic Church. Am I making sense? Odunaike and his group, Segun Odunaike and his group, were excommunicated from the Apostolic Church. And being someone who moved around the world, he was working with a petroleum company. And he moves around, very top officer. And he came across the Faith Tabernacle. And he said, since I could not worship in the Apostolic Church, and I don't want to go to Christ Apostolic Church, he brought in the Foursquare. He was the one that brought in Foursquare into Nigeria. So it was the conflict between the Apostolic Church and Christ Apostolic Church that did what? Brought Foursquare into Nigeria. Go and research into it, and you'll find it, whether I'm right or not. The registration, what gave Ebute-Elefun an edge over all the churches is only because by the time of the registration of the church, that place was made the general headquarters. And I will also want to share an experience with you, which I think I put there. All these leaders were talking with one voice. And the decision was taken at Ibadan. Pastor Hansen then wrote and signed to the establishment that will register. It was not called Corporate Affairs then, but that establishment, he wrote Land Perpetual something something something, they called that place then. They sent in that application back, and they said decision must be taken at Ebute-Elefun. 1. 2, that the church secretary should be the one to sign, and not assistant secretary, who happens to be the missionary secretary. Pastor Hansen was the missionary secretary, the first missionary secretary, and not the first general secretary. So he wrote on behalf of the church. Baba Akiyele was there and all others. But the body that should register pointed out this anomaly. And they had to bring the paper back to Ebute-Elefun. And they took a decision, or confirming that decision. Some of them were at that meeting at Ibadan. But they now confirmed that decision, and Papa Sonya now signed as the general secretary. Baba Sonya now signed as the general secretary. Am I communicating? I may not be following this paper one for one. It's only for you to, as a guide, because I will soon go into the second paper and we are supposed to close very early. But I will give you every details in this paper. Another area which I will also want to let you know, which I have not put here, is that the president at that time was ceremonial, not executive. As the man said yesterday, Baba Odubanjo was the chairman of the board of trustees. Board of trustees. There were only three members of the board of trustees. We are there. The general superintendent, the president, the general superintendent, and the general evangelist. No more, no less. We are the trustees. And along the line, general evangelist was deleted. I will tell you the reason. I'll tell you the reason. The three leaders that were trustees were the founders of Christ Apostolic Church. They had their own followings or followers. Baba was living that of Lagos. Akinyele was living that of Ibadan. And Baba Babalola was living that of Ekiti Axis, as we've heard yesterday. Abi? So automatically, when you are marrying them together, they should be trustees. 3. Confirming the Trinity of God. Confirming the Trinity of God. Later on, these are not in my paper, but they are very, very vital information. I did not deliberately left them off, but it triggered off because of the lecture yesterday that I had, and there are certain gaps that must be filled. Why is the General Superintendent not in Lagos again? Can anybody tell me? Why did we delete or not include the successor to Baba Babalola as being trustee? And that was Babajide. He was not made a trustee at that time. And I tell you the reasons. Baba Odubanjo died in 1959. Definitely someone has to take up his position. Abi? Èèyàn kan ṣàn láti gbapò. Ẹni tó dẹ̀ gbapò ni Baba Odùṣọ̀nà. And they posted Baba Odùṣọ̀nà to Lagos. But there had been problem on the death of Baba Odubanjo. Or with the death of Baba Odubanjo. This is a statement of fact that will not get in any book. They will not write it. But if a researcher like that pastor from another church or from any other where came to research on it, we will tell him this story and he will write. These are statements of facts. Baba preached on a Sunday. Baba Odubanjo preached, and after his sermon, he went into the vestry and he ran into coma. After his sermon, he went into the vestry and he ran into coma. Where he was praying. And that was where the man left. On his knees. He was on his knees when he ran into coma. And they packed him, praying, and dismissed all of us from the service. Ẹ máa lọ́lé, ẹnikẹ́ni ò gbọdọ̀ dúró, kò sí pàdé lẹ́yìn ìsìn. Gbogbo yín àdúrà àti tá a ti gbà, ẹ máa lọ́lé, kẹ́nikẹ́ni má dúró. Nobody knew Baba had gone or was going. And everybody left. They locked up the church. And our fathers were praying, Olúwa dá padà, Olúwa dá padà, Olúwa ò dẹ̀ dá padà. What was the next thing for them? And they said, only very few of them took that decision. Not all the pastors were in the know. They took this decision, and his junior brother, who happened to be a judge in Lagos State at that time, or in Lagos, there was no state then. Do I call him his brother? I will call him his son too. Nítorí ọmọ ẹ̀gbọ́n Baba Odubanjo ni eléyìí. Ọmọ ẹ̀gbọ́n ẹ̀ ni adájọ́ yìí. And one of our fathers, because I'm talking to the members of CAC and whosoever, I want you to note, ẹni tí ó phone was Baba Odunaya Obanlearo, called him. Wow, nǹkan báyìí ti ṣẹlẹ̀ ń bí o. Níṣe ni kò gbójú torí wọn ò ní gbé bàbá yìí lọ sí hospital, á sì kú sí wa lọ́rùn. Ṣé ni kò ṣègbójú kó wọlé kó lé gbogbo asẹ́yìn kó wá gbé bàbá yín kó ń bí báyìí. And that man came because he's an adájọ́, you know, who will face him? And he came with his orderly, and they packed the man to the hospital. They packed the man to the hospital. I am saying the truth, nothing but the truth. Pastor Degun was not in the know. Pastor I.D. Degun was not in the know. And he was one of the pastors in that assembly. So not all of them knew. Because they know. Some will say, no. Baba must stay there. Baba must stay there. So they packed him up and they took him to the hospital. After some days, Baba regained consciousness, found that he was being assisted to come alive. Gbogbo àwọn syringes and all those things were with him. The gas was in his mouth. And some of our fathers, of course, were with him. My father was there with him in the hospital. And he said, he called them one after the other. He called my father, Joseph, call others, call every other person. Níbo ni mo wà yìí? Ta ló gbé mi wá síbí báyìí? Ta ló gbé mi wá síbí báyìí? Kí lẹ fẹ́ kí Dégún sọ? And he removed all those things from him, his body, extricating them. And he said, after some time, they said he looked around like this, and he said, I am going to New Jerusalem, and he shook his head like this, and he died. I am going to New Jerusalem, and he died. That was what brought about the first problem within the CAC. His death brought about the first problem. The death brought about Lagos not being united. It was after effect of that took Olorunshogo, headed by Pastor Adegoroye, to secede from Lagos. Those of you from Olorunshogo, that land belongs to Ebute Elefun 100%. But they seceded from Lagos, from Ebute Elefun, after the death of Baba Odubanjo. I was talking why the general superintendent is no longer at Ebute Elefun. It was that process that led to it. When Baba Odushono came to Lagos, people were not eager to receive. He was first posted to Lagos when there was division. All those who participated in moving Baba Odubanjo to the hospital were suspended, including Pastor Degun, who said, "Mi ò mọ̀ npa ẹ̀." They said, "Kí ló ṣe tó mọ̀ npa ẹ̀?" He was also suspended. And that suspension, they gave them a place to sit in the church. You must always come to the church. And they gave them a seat where they would sit in the church to serve as their punishment. Toba suspend èèyàn ní CAC lẹ́ni alóhùn wá ṣọ́ọ̀ṣì yẹn mọ́. But all these people bowed to these directives, and they were always coming to the church, and they would sit among the congregation. Then also, payment of the salaries of these principal officers were made by the assembly, not from the center. Am I communicating? And not from the center. So Baba Odushono that now came, Ebute Elefun was to pay. An elder was the treasurer of the church. So by the time they should prepare the salary, they won't see that fat Baba. And for good 6 months, Baba Odushono had no salary. After 6 months, Baba said, "Hey, le wa fi bi pa mi l'Eko." And he left for Ibadan. But they were acting on a script. That's what I will say. Lagos was acting on a script. He had gone. Who is now to be in Lagos? They made Babolu Fobi to be in Lagos and stay there, and he was assistant general superintendent. And a trustee must also come from Lagos out of the three. I hope you are following my sequence. A trustee has to remain in Lagos, but is not the general superintendent. But God has a way of making certain things. God created a way for us in Lagos to have Olufobi as a trustee. How? Baba Odubanjo died April. Babalola died July, I think. July. On the day of the burial of Baba Odubanjo, because I was the smallest in the choir, and all the choirs were supposed to be online at the burial. So I was fortunate. If you saw the photographs, someone showed me my photograph that time. I never knew I was. I stood and Babalola came there because I had that. Baba, máa lọ, máa join yín láìpẹ́. Baba, máa lọ, máa join yín láìpẹ́. It has no meaning to us. To us, it has no meaning. Tó bá ní láìpẹ́, nígbà tí òun ṣe pé ó lọ gbé sódà mi. So, and he was a young man. And when he left, not quite 2-3 weeks after he left Lagos, la gbọ́ pé Babalola, because after the death of Baba Odubanjo, he was conducting revival to revive us. The death shook Lagos, so he wanted to revive us. So he stayed. No sooner he left Lagos, we heard he was dead. Baba sọ pé òun ń bọ̀ ó dẹ̀ ti lọ. So in that process, and of course, people were thinking, but they've always been talking. Tí lẹ́yìn Baba ta ló kàn. We had a lot of people who are evangelists, but they never knew who will be the person that will take over from Babalola. But Babalola, to what they told us, oral information, we were told that he said, ẹni bá ń ṣe bíi tèmi, òun ló máa gbapò mi. Ẹni bá ń ṣe bíi tèmi, the way he is conducting revival, òun ló máa gba ipò mi. Out of all the people that we are under Babalola, tó sì lè sọ̀rọ̀ bíi ti èmi, the first person that did so was Babajide. Babalola, if he was conducting the revival, by the time he will get to that place, you don't know. During revival, you will just be, it will be too much in the hall for you. And no sooner he left, the same thing Babajide was doing. Those of you who knew Babajide, you will see he was jumping from one chair, bench, to the other during revival. Or will you see Babajide? Ní orúkọ Jésù. Is that what he was doing? He was always jumping from one chair to the other. And he was a very, very young man, a very young minister. So they could not make him a trustee. And they made Baba Olufobi a trustee in his stead. Am I communicating? So they made Baba Olufobi a trustee instead of Babajide. So after Olufobi retired, because he only stayed for a few years before his retirement, and who was to take over from Olufobi became a point of tussle. Listen, became a point of tussle and disagreement between Shogbeson and Degun. And people preferred Shogbeson to Degun. Let me tell you, Degun is my family. So I am not, so that's a statement of fact. They prefer Shogbeson to Degun. So Shogbeson was made the Assistant General Superintendent for Lagos. And Baba Degun was moved to Ijebu-Ode. Go and be the superintendent for Ijebu-Ode while Shogbeson would retain Lagos. So because he moved to Ijebu-Ode and Baba Adegore was very loyal to him, Adegore was reporting to him at Ijebu-Ode instead of to Shogbeson in Lagos. So that was why I said, in my opening paper, I was defining the position of Lagos State. Abi? And I said a church in Enugu had an assembly in Victoria Island. So how can we now say a district in Lagos reporting to Ijebu-Ode? So they let him go. And they gave him a separate autonomy. They gave Adegoroye an autonomy. And that was why we still have Lagos 1, Lagos 2. To appease them. So they no longer report to Ijebu-Ode, but be autonomous on your own. You will not get that in the record. Who will write that? Answer me. Nobody. No, if people come to interview me, I will tell you, then you go and put it down. And you put reference. Someone gave me that information. Let them now come and query me. Ṣé kò ń ṣe òótọ́? Mi ò ṣàkọọ́lẹ̀ ṣùgbọ́n tí mo rí ni wọ́n wá béèrè ni. And since then, we have lost the position of the General Superintendent in Lagos. It was the beginning of saying, okay, nígbà tán bá lè máa fìyà jẹ àwọn olórí báyìí, kí ló ṣe tá máa kú wa máa gbé wọn síbì kan, ẹ jẹ́ kí gbogbo wà lójú kan ṣo. Baba Akinyele was in charge of Olugbode. So ẹ jẹ́ kí gbogbo akúkú ṣe kí ni o, ká wà lójú kan, kán má bàa fìyà máa jẹ àwọn olórí wa mọ́. So the management that took that decision had reason for doing so. I still wonder how Lagos can regain that position of the General Superintendent. I'm talking of the church planting, evangelism and church planting. I'm happy to say these people, our fathers, had no problem in establishing churches at those periods. We have problems these days because things are not being done the way it should be done. This started only when Baba Faniyan became the head of this church. This thing became prominent when Baba Faniyan became the head of this church. He was the one, or his team banned Light of the World. Am I right? Do you know what is Light of? Have you ever heard of Light of the World? Banned Light of the World. Banned United Association of CAC Choirs, which I was the Assistant General Secretary all over Nigeria, and the Secretary of the Choir in Lagos State and Ogun. So I know what I'm talking. Baba Faniyan banned them. Why did he ban them is another thing for another day. Banned the Students Association. Why did he ban them is another thing for another day. Huh? You want to know? Yes. Okay. I will tell you. If I get to the second paper, I will let you know the age when our father started this work. Many of them were bachelors when they started, so they were young men. Ṣùgbọ́n àwọn bàbá yẹn, àwa bàbá, let me put it now that way. A fẹ́ káwọn ọmọdé gbérí. Hi. Hello. They saw us as a threat to them. we are not being paid. We were sacrificing our time, our money, and everything for the development of the church. And those of us like that, if we saw anything that was wrong, we will see. The choir was banned because there was a problem between within Itire assembly. That problem started at Itire. Oyebadejo was the head of the choir at Itire, and he had an issue with Baba Okwaise on the administration of the church. And a statement came out from Baba Oyebadejo. When Okwaise said, and he said, "Our not important. After all, Taba ma wole a man dide fun wa." Ṣé akọrin náà ń dìde fún ni àbí Ọlọ́run? But it came as a pride to signify the importance of the choir in the scheme of things in the church. And he said, tó bá jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ ni a ò ní dìde fún yín mọ́, a ẹ̀ sì ní tò wọlé mọ́, agbára pàdé agbára in the church of God. In the church of God. Agbára pàdé agbára. And they started sitting at Itire, and we were not happy about that. We were not happy, and the leadership of the choir all over stood against it. And Baba Okwaise said, "You know him?" He said, "This is my own church. This is our own way of things. Tí ò bá tẹ́ ẹ̀ bá fẹ́, àwọn ọmọ mi ò ní wá pẹ̀lú yín mọ́." They will not join you together. They will not come to our meetings again. They will not be part of the Lagos choir again. And Oyebadejo was our director in Lagos. How could you now say you don't want the director to attend our meetings? So we said, okay, ẹ máa ṣe tiyín lọ́hùn, ká máa ṣe tàwa. And Baba took it up at the national level, and they banned us from sitting or writing. That was the beginning of the problem. And we were now pushing that problem. Oyesanya Tebute Meta, who happens to be our director, national director, or the president, and I was the secretary. In Ebute Lefun, we refused to bow to that law. Ebute Meta refused to bow to that law, and he said, "Ẹ̀yin ọmọ yẹn fún mi ní headache. So dakobiri, you are giving me headache because this is my church as the pastor in charge. And you, Oyesanya, you are giving me headache because you are part of Lagos district. And gbogbo Nigeria gbà pé kó máa jókòó àti sọ wọ́n gbà wọ́n jókòó. Ẹ̀yin méjèèjì ṣọ́ọ̀ṣì wọ́n ṣà ń jókòó ni. Tó bá máa ṣe ìyàwó wọ́n á jókòó bí arọ. This was our thinking. Ẹ fẹ́ ṣe ìyàwó ẹ mú ìyàwó bọ́ ẹni kan jókòó bí arọ sílẹ̀. The day of the honor, when you should give these people honor, ẹni kan máa jókòó, ẹ tún ṣe ìyàwó tán, wọ́n á tún túká. Ẹ wọ inú chọ́ọ̀chì, àwọn èèyàn ń pariwo inú chọ́ọ̀chì, wọ́n ti ẹ̀mọ̀gbà tó bẹ̀rẹ̀ sáfíìsì mọ́. And we said no. Ìgbódẹ̀ yàṣá, one way or the other, àwa náà bá àjùwọ́ sílẹ̀, ìyẹn la ṣe ń ṣe. So ìtorí ìyẹn náà ṣe bá ní wa o. Wípé that United Association of CAC Choir is now banned. Ẹ yé gbó wa lẹ́nu mọ́. Ṣé ti mọ̀ díẹ̀ báyìí? Student Association was banned because Arije Sudade, who was their president, had made himself an authority, had made himself a separate authority from the authority of the church, which was not fair enough. He was conducting marriages tí ò kàn láti ṣe. Of course, he is a pastor, but there is what you call hierarchy, there is what is called procedure. Lè ní tó pẹ́ jẹ́ student association, àwọn ọmọ student association fẹ́ ṣe ìyàwó, lè ń lọ ṣe ìyàwó fún ọ. What concerns you? Ṣebí church kan náà ń lọ. Why not do it in their church? So ìyẹn náà ṣe ban àwọn yẹn o. But I don't think banning should have been the right thing. That's a different thing. Ṣé mọ́lẹ̀ ayé ẹ fẹ́ mọ̀? Ìyẹn ló dùn mí jù. Ìyẹn ló dùn mí jù. And it's an unfortunate thing. That was the time churches within churches, church within church started. And these people are the most powerful people in the corridors of power. And ẹgbẹ́ ìmọ́lẹ̀ ayé was doing it a human service. Olúkálùkù ló wà nínú ẹgbẹ́ ìmọ́lẹ̀ ayé. Ẹ̀ ń gbàdúrà tẹ́ bá rí ilẹ̀ a rí ilẹ̀ bí bó bá jówó ilẹ̀ fi rà ẹ rà ẹ gbé fún district tó wà lábẹ́ ẹ̀ ni. Kò ń ṣe pé ẹ sọ di empire tì í. That was the way ìmọ́lẹ̀ ayé was moving. But these powerful people having ministry, I don't want to start mentioning. Tó bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní ministry of their own in the church. We are controlling. Àwọn ará bí yóò ní jẹ́ àṣẹ tiwa ẹ̀jẹ̀ àbá ni wọn. Am I making sense? Tó bá jẹ́ rọ́ ni ẹ lọ wádìí náà. In those days, Lagos had control over all the churches. Torí tó bá lọ ń dálẹ̀, a fẹ́ ra ilẹ̀, a fẹ́ ṣe nǹkan. They will write to Ebute Elefu. Ebute Elefu will provide 80% of the cost of the land. 80% of the cost of the land. Ẹ̀yin tí ẹ ní church tẹ fẹ́ máa worship ń bẹ̀ yẹn, because they wanted you to be part of the development of the church. You put in the 20%. So ẹ̀yin lẹ dá owó yẹn torí owó tó ń dá is not coming to the center. Money was not coming to the center and is no longer even not coming to the center. You are the one controlling your money. So why should we now buy the whole land for you and say you continue? So they will tell you, contribute 20%, we give you the 80% and you own the land. And that was it. So and people say he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And that was why we have cordial relationship within those churches. Until when people now came and said, ẹ jẹ́ kan lọ́bẹ̀ yẹn, àwọn àlùfáà tán dìde lẹ́yìn ìgbà yẹn, àwọn náà ya ìjọ. Torí olúkálùkù fẹ́ di power unto himself. They don't want to bow to seniors. And that was the beginning of olúkálùkù ṣe tiwọn, kónkó jábélé. The issue at the land at Ọlọ́run Ṣògo was bought 100% by Ebute Elefu. But there was a church at Idioru. It was a rented apartment, not their own apartment, not their own. That church, ó wà lẹ́yìn petrol station, kan báyìí níbi petrol station. Mi ò mọ bí tọ́bí mi ò mọ bí Alaka or something of such náà pé area yẹn. So at that area, tabati kúrò there is one apostolic church in that place. I don't know, can you go be a mission apostolic church on the road? So on that side, after you leave that place, the first petrol station you are going to meet was where that church was at the back. I don't know. But when they had problem, the land at Ọlọ́run Ṣògo was there, and I was told gbogbo àwọn ọmọ tó kú lásìkò yẹn mortality ṣe àmọ́ ìpọ́ndà western region níbẹ̀ yẹn wà tó bá kú òru náà ni bàbá Odúbánjọ máa gbé wọn sẹ́yìn kẹ̀kẹ́. Àwọn ọmọ wẹ́wẹ́ tó bá kú ó máa gun kẹ̀kẹ́ wá sí ilẹ̀ wa tó wà lọ́lọ́run Ṣògo tó máa wá sí wọn sí. Àwọn ọmọ tó kú ní maternity home ibẹ̀ yẹn náà lọ ń sin wọ́n sí nínú igbó yẹn. Am I communicating? So it was bought 100%. They had other motive, not for the church. They had other motive for that place. They had intention of having a school in that place, but church took preeminence from them. So when they had problem and another assembly or one or two more assemblies within that area now came together to have that land, and they made it a church. And today it is Ọlọ́run ṣògo. Ọlọ́run ṣògo kẹ̀rí kò sí ohun tó ń ṣe tán pè wá lébùté ẹlẹ́fun, and yet is our land. Kò dẹ̀ sí ohun tá a ṣe lébùté ẹlẹ́fun tó ń wá, and yet is our land. Ẹ wá, that's good. And yet is our land. So these are the things that are going on. When you talk of other places, I will talk of Ajah, so which is of recent. Ajah belongs 100% to Ebute Elefu. And we had a small church very close, a rented apartment. One day, ìlú yẹn kò sí church, kò sí Christianity. From Morocco down, apart from Morocco, then you get some churches. But after Morocco down, kò sí church. We are the first to take church to that place. Ó di lóru àwọn eléégún náà níbi tá a wà. Wọ́n dẹ̀ sọ pé àwọn ò fẹ́ wá ń bẹ̀ mọ́, à ń ní wọ́n lára. And we got about 8 plots ní ibi bẹ̀ yẹn. So a fẹ́ ní ilé àlùfáà sí ibẹ̀ yẹn. A fẹ́ kọ́ school, a dẹ̀ fẹ́ kọ́ guest house. Ohun tá a fẹ́ kọ́ bẹ̀ presidential lodge. Aláàfẹ́ níbẹ̀ pé whenever the president comes to Lagos, he should have a place to sleep. That was why we bought that land. But when these people were now troubling them, we asked them to come to that place. So we gave them 2 plots of land there. And by the time Lagos was, I don't want to use that language, so let me keep that language. When Lagos grew and they gave you zones and all that, blah, 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 it became problem for us to house our chairman, Pastor Bandele. Bandele was at Yaba. Yaba has now got his own independence to become his own coordinating council. Could you now put him there? And they said, that was the beginning. So we now said, okay, and we shared another 2 plots of land for the building of that place to house our pastor in charge. So I need another 2 plots. I don't know whether we can even get back to that land again. So we are talking of the development of churches within Lagos. Ditto when you are talking of Olushi. Olushi happens to be the first land that CAC had ever bought. Yes. Olushi happens to be the first land tí wọ́n fi owó ara wọn rà, tí mo ní o, wọ́n fi owó ara wọn rà. When you go to Ibadan and that's other places, Bàbá Olúbàdàn ló ń fún wọn lẹ̀. But eléyìí tẹ́ wá fi owó rà báyìí, tẹ́lẹ̀ fi owó yín rà, Olúṣí ló kọ́kọ́ jẹ́. The general headquarters could not be there. That place was lowland tẹ́lẹ̀. Kò ṣe develop that area at that time. Tabalama develop it will consume a lot of money. So they left it, and they happened to get another place where they now put that church, even though it's very small. So Olushi is now a zone of its own, no longer under Ebute Elefu. Your itire. 80% of that cost came from Ebute Elefu. Go and see your record. I knew when Baba Okpaise came and he said, àwọn rí ilẹ̀ ń bì kan, àwọn fẹ́ rà, kò dẹ̀ sówó lọ́wọ́ wọn. Àwa náà láà lówó, àwọn bàbá ní àwọn náà lówó. Àwọn ẹ̀gbọ́n mi ni wọ́n mọ̀ ń ṣe bàbá mi ń gbà yín pàápàá. Àwọn ẹ̀gbọ́n mi ló wà ń bẹ̀ ń gbà yín, àwọn bàbá wa ti kú. And they said, àwa náà lówó. ẹ má jẹ́ ó lọ, ó da ẹ yá wa ní owó yẹn. Ó wá di àyà àsan. Ó wá di àyà àsan. Ta ló fẹ́ lọ béèrè? Ta la fẹ́ gbowó lọ́wọ́ ẹ̀? CAC. So it was regarded as an evangelism, cause of evangelism. So many of the lands were purchased. Agege, Shiaba. Do you want to know about that? Shiaba. There was a problem with Baba Odunaya some time ago. The youth in Shiaba called Baba Odunaya Ole. Wọ́n ló lè ní. And the man just laughed. That land, expanse of land, wọ́n ó pín sí ọ̀nà mẹ́ta òun ló ní nǹkan ẹ̀. Odunaya owned that property at the onset. Ó pín ilẹ̀ yẹn sí ọ̀nà mẹ́ta. Ó pè kan fún church, ó tà yẹn ni. So ibi tí ẹ wà yẹn, ó tà á. Ó wá tún fi kún eléyìí tó ṣe kẹta yẹn, ó wá join ẹ̀ mọ́ ìyẹn, ó wá fún CAC. Ó pín sọ́nà mẹ́ta. Are you getting me? Òun mú kan. Ó tà kan fún CAC. Ó fi kan fún CAC as his own contribution. But people never knew. The youth never knew during that period. Wọ́n wá ní olè ní bàbá yẹn. They wanted to claim his own part of the land. I think we have something to learn from him. Bàbá òkùnkùn bá wọn jà. Bàbá ò dẹ̀ ṣépè fún wọn. Ó ní ṣùgbọ́n ẹ kóra yín jọ, òun á wá bá yín nínú pàdé. Ó sì lọ pàdé. Ó mú àwọn ọmọ ẹ̀ dání. Nínú àwọn ọmọ ẹ̀ kan wá lọ gbọ́tàn pé torí tóun bá kú o, kẹ́ lè ráyè fi fún wọn lésì. And he also went with late lawyer Ṣógbẹ̀san to that meeting. Kí wọ́n lè gbọ́ dáadáa. So at that meeting, that was how I also heard. Pé òun ò ń ṣolé o, báyìí, and they showed them all the documents. So bí Shiaba ṣe wáyé nìyẹn. So ẹ̀yin ọ̀tẹ̀ wà ń bẹ ẹ mọ̀ tán bẹ yẹn o, báyìí pé ẹ̀yin kọ́ lẹ rà. Èbúté ẹlẹ́fun ló rà. Odunaya dẹ̀ tó fún yín nínú ẹ̀. Ohun tí ilẹ̀ yẹn ṣe tóbi nìyẹn. Am I communicating? I think I'm running out of time. In my paper, I try as much as possible to let you know how things were. Those who presided over Ebute Elefun